Trying to explain pro wrestling to a non-fan is a pretty tricky affair. It's not all Greco-Roman headlocks and flips, and whilst great matches and athletic displays are the centrepiece of the wrestling meal, you need a good story to get there in order to make those payoffs worthwhile. Acting is an important part of telling a story, and thus pro wrestling. Most wrestlers aren't going to be winning an Emmy anytime soon, but if they can do just enough to get their audience invested, then they're golden. The men and women on this list aren't golden, silver or bronze. In fact, they'd be much more at home with the nominations you see for the annual Razzies. I'm Cy for WhatCulture.com, and these are the 10 worst actors in WWE. Number 10, the Bella Twins. Hey, starting off with a 2-for-1 deal. Nikki gets a special mention here because while she certainly has improved over time, she had the honour of the infamous "I wish you died in the womb" zinger that may just go down as the Bella Twins' single most remembered moment. That being said, Brie Bella was always the most awkward when it came to the acting part of the pro wrestling business. For one thing, the aforementioned promo cut against her by her sister produces one of many examples of wrestlers contorting their face in horrible ways to make it look as though they're crying. But even beyond that, Brie just always felt permanently uncomfortable. Even when yelling her own catchphrase Brie mode, she never felt like she was putting all of her effort into it, and who could forget the constant calls of "Come on, Nikki" from outside the ring during tag matches. If her husband Daniel Bryan didn't have to drop the WWE Championship, one has to wonder what would have happened to his perception, considering after winning the big one he was paired up with his wife on screen. This culminated in a segment where Kane appears in the couple's car and Brie screams for about 90 seconds straight like a foghorn. If their heel antics didn't make you hate them, Brie's acting certainly did the trick. Number 9, the Great KALI. The Great KALI once put his foot on the chest of the Phenom Undertaker to pin him like it was nothing. He also struggled to sing "Deck the Halls" on a Christmas episode and just started belting out "fa la 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 la" without a hint of irony. Now, you have to be lenient here, as America wasn't the Great KALI's home country, nor was English his first language, and he always looked uncomfortable. Acting isn't just about the emotion, it's about making every moment look genuine. KALI, no matter what he was doing, could never do anything without it being obvious that he was thinking it all over very carefully, whether it was routinely looking for his mark or waiting for his moment to speak lines that looked like they were physically painful for the big guy to memorise. As is often the case with characters that start off as brooding giants, Great KALI made the leap to comedy pretty quickly, and it was definitely a better fit for him. Whilst his inability to speak coherently was played for laughs, KALI did it with a smile. We can only hope he was actually enjoying himself, because this borders on very wrong if he wasn't. Number 8, Steve Blackman. The Lethal Weapon was a popular mid-card wrestler with a great look and was a legitimate tough guy. I mean, heck, he's a real-life bounty hunter, but he never ascended any higher than the WWF Hardcore Championship. Blackman couldn't talk, and in any other era he would have been given a manager to help him with that, but in the late 90s the WWE had moved away from personal mouthpieces and everyone had to speak for themselves. It worked great for stars like the most electrifying man in the biz, The Rock of course, but Steve Blackman's own brand of electricity stopped as soon as he opened his mouth. Promos can be found of him intently staring at and yelling in the face of Terry Taylor instead of looking down the camera to address his opponent, emphasising the wrong words and stumbling over others. For a time, Blackman's lack of personality was so noticeable that it became his gimmick, and he was paired with the fun-loving Al Snow to form Head Cheese. Whilst there's humour to be had here, it's still very clear that Blackman is struggling. Everything he says sounds like he's reading it off of a cue card out of shot. I wouldn't say any of this to his face though, because, you know, he's terrifying. Number 7, Torrie Wilson. For all of the parts of the Attitude Era that have aged poorly, its treatment of the women's division is one that we'd surely all rather forget. WWE audiences nor the company cared for female wrestling, and it wasn't uncommon for ladies with zero experience to get hired by the corporation and thrown out on live television just because they looked good. If you watch any Torrie Wilson backstage or promo segment, you'll see how even the most basic emotions seem to escape Torrie's performances. Infamously, Torrie Wilson was slapped across the face on an episode of WCW Monday Nitro by Randy Savage for laughing when she shouldn't be. Admittedly, Randy was going off script at the time, but Torrie's inability to keep a straight face set a precedent for her acting career in pro wrestling. It is as plain as day that she was never going to be one of the company's best actors, and that kind of skill clearly didn't run in the family. When Torrie clashed with Dawn Marie over her relationship with her father, Al Wilson was just as painfully awkward. In fact, all three of them were awful, which is what makes the feud even more memorable. A car crash storyline featuring some unbelievably questionable moments, all played out by cardboard cutouts instead of actors. Number 6, Rob Van Dam. Some might say that the best wrestlers are those who can play both sides of the fence, adored babyface and abhorrent heel. It's not an easy thing to do though, not in equal measure especially, and it's the case for many that they find their niche and stay there. The Miz, Mr. Kennedy and Bobby Lashley, just great examples of guys who struggle to play a convincing good guy. Rob Van Dam was special in that his lack of acting chops pretty much made him the polar opposite. After the conclusion of the Invasion angle, RVD never played a heel during his tenure with the WWE, and in all fairness, it's difficult to picture such a thing working. Now, I'm not here to actually cuss out Van Dam for his promo ability. Unlike most on this list, the guy can actually speak when given a microphone. His range is very limited though, and all the emotion he brings can hardly be called acting. RVD's incredibly laid-back character is no character at all. That's just the real guy you're seeing. Luckily, RVD has never really been asked to do anything that exposes his lack of acting experience. Instead, the character has remained completely consistent for 20 years, and it needn't be more complicated than pointing to his own shoulders. Number 5. RUSEV'S lawyer. WWE has a history of appearances of one-off characters inserted to move a storyline along. Some are great, shout out to you Dr. Shelby, some are functional, and then there are others. We've all heard the stories of Vince McMahon rewriting TV up until the 11th hour, and it may have been a lack of pre-planning that caused this segment in question to go horribly wrong. The company put out a call on March 16, 2015 for someone available later that day to play the lawyer of Bulgarian brute Rusev. Local stand-up Doug Stone was chosen for the part, and since the feud was not only over the United States title but also against all-American hero John Cena, the bewildered comedian was tasked with healing it up with an over-the-top Russian accent. So over the top in fact that it fell flat immediately. Not only were audiences at home laughing at the character, Vince McMahon, it appears, took to instructing his commentary team to do the same. JBL rips the guy a new one, turning the planned serious segment into something that paints the lawyer as a liar and a phony, and Booker T exclaims, "Did you hear that accent? That guy's from Texas." Doug Stone, we wish you all the best in your comedy career, just don't try doing any more impressions. Number 4. KALI. Torrie Wilson's previously mentioned hiring was no way an isolated incident, and it wasn't the kind of thing that stopped in the Attitude Era. In fact, in the grand scheme of things, it's only really recently that the WWE have treated the women's division with even a modicum of respect. KALI signed with the company in 2006 when she was just 19 years old. She didn't have any wrestling experience, but she had studied broadcast journalism at college with hopes of becoming a television actor. It seems she wasn't really given much of a chance to get her feet under her when it came to ring work, but that's okay because she couldn't act her way out of a paper bag either. Consistently robotic in every segment she was in, Kelly was largely used as the character of girlfriend, or quite simply eye candy, for a long period of time. One particularly awful example of her acting came when she was pleading for an emotional connection from Randy Orton of all people after an apparent one-night stand. It's not just her flat delivery, but her desire to speed through every line without taking a breath that hurts. In a particularly hilarious moment in 2010, Kelly was sent to NXT to become a mentor for the rookie Naomi, who naturally wrestled and talked circles around her. Number 3. KALISTO. Reading a script is fine and all, but when it comes to acting, you sometimes need to be able to improvise. After all, anything can happen in the World Wrestling Federation, and this is doubly true with its live programming. KALISTO was never much of a talker, either as part of the Lucha House Party or as a solo star, but he does have one particular microphone moment that stands out. I'm not quite sure what it was about getting drafted to SmackDown in 2016 that made KALISTO so excited, but a brief backstage cutaway to the luchador saw him so amped that he could barely speak. Announcer Greg Hamilton asked him what fans could expect, and KALISTO's brain just stopped dead in its tracks. You can visibly see him realising he's not able to dig himself out of this hole after he mispronounces Baron Corbin's name and promises the fans he's here to make a good lucha thing. He concludes the segment by whooping and running out of frame, presumably to go and hide in the locker room for the rest of the evening. 2 years later, in a WWE YouTube video, the company celebrated the botch, which only made it more likely to be the thing that most people remember about KALISTO's long but uneventful WWE run. Number 2. Rikishi. One of the Attitude Era's most simple but beautiful gimmicks was Too Cool, combining the tag team efforts of Scotty 2 Hotty and Grandmaster Sexay with Rikishi, who for years had struggled to find his place in the company after a string of unsuccessful gimmick changes. It couldn't last forever though, and sure enough, Rikishi left the group to partake in an experimental heel turn. Rikishi admitting he himself ran down Stone Cold Steve Austin is remembered for the line, "I did it for The Rock," and that's probably for very good reason. Not that the story wasn't silly, but Rikishi's delivery of his version of the events was meandering and unconvincing. The future bad man kept fidgeting around on the spot, struggling to look anyone in the ring in the eyes. Rikishi's only heel run in the WWE lasted for about 4 months before he had to take time off with injury and unsurprisingly came back as a babyface. It wasn't just that his previous revelation had gone down like a lead balloon, but he just wasn't believable nor interesting as a bad guy. Audiences liked Rikishi a lot better when he said very little and danced a whole lot more. Number 1. Linda McMahon. Never a legitimate competitor, Linda McMahon was nonetheless an on and off character on WWE TV who always managed to get the right reactions during her big moments. To be fair, it's probably the diabolical storylines that led to those huge pops. Vince parading around kissing Trish Stratus in front of his temporarily wheelchair user wife until she finally rises to her feet and hoofs him in the proverbial grapefruits. You can kind of understand why fans gave her the loud babyface reaction. It wasn't anything to do with her acting chops. And to be fair, she wasn't an actor, just a part of Vince's world, drawn onto TV by the man's strange obsession with playing scripted family drama out in front of an international audience. Linda's flat microphone work was shocking, and anytime she had to reveal major upcoming matches, she put absolutely no pomp or circumstance into them. Announcing that The Rock, Undertaker and Kane would team up to get their hands on Triple H, Shane and Vince at King of the Ring 2000 should have been shouted from the rooftops, not mumbled out by the boss's wife. Did she get a massive cheer for telling Vince she wanted a divorce? Yes, of course. Did she sound less like a human and more like a cyborg asking for an oil change? Also yes. And that's the list. Let us know what you thought down in those comments below, and let us know any other terrible actors in the WWE system, past or present. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, share it with your friends and hit the notification bell. I've been Si from What Culture, and have a good week.